Monsoon climate creates distinct wet and dry seasons through seasonal wind shifts that bring heavy rainfall in summer and dry conditions in winter. What conditions are prime for monsoon climates in your world building? This isn't an exhaustive list, but I want to highlight 5 things. First, look for tropical or subtropical latitudes. These latitudes experience the necessary temperature and pressure differentials to drive monsoons. Second, look for regions that are adjacent to large bodies of water. You need that moisture coming in. Third, look for seasonal temperature differences. In summer, the landmass heats up much faster than the surrounding ocean due to the lower heat capacity of land. This creates a low pressure system over the land and a relatively high pressure system over the cooler ocean. The pressure gradient causes moist oceanic air to move inland and brings heavy rainfall, typical of monsoons. In winter, the land cools down rapidly, forming a high pressure system, while the ocean retains more heat and remains relatively warmer, creating a low pressure system over the water. This causes the winds to reverse direction, with dry air moving from the land toward the ocean, leading to a drier season. Fourth, look for those reversing wind directions. So, the intertropical convergence zone, which is a belt of converging trade winds near the equator, shifts northward or southward with the changing seasons. As it moves, it influences wind patterns, particularly in tropical regions. During summer, the zone shifts toward land masses, drawing moist air in from the oceans, while in winter it moves away, causing the winds to reverse direction. Fifth and finally, look for mountain ranges near coastal regions. Monsoon regions are often influenced by mountain regions because they enhance rainfall on the windward side of the mountain, forcing that moist air to rise and cool, which causes precipitation. But how does a monsoon climate shape your world and the people that live in it? First, let's look at the effect of a monsoon climate on agriculture and agricultural development. The development of agricultural technology in monsoon cultures is connected with the seasonal rhythms of heavy rainfall, the challenges of water management, and the need to maximize crop yields in often unpredictable environments. Over centuries, many of these cultures have adapted their farming techniques, tools, and infrastructure to harness the benefits of monsoons while mitigating its risk. In the early stages of agriculture in monsoon regions, the primary challenge had to be the intense seasonal rains and ensuring the survival of crops during the dry season. Early farmers approached this by selecting flood resistant crops like rice, which thrive in waterlogged conditions. These crops became staples in many monsoon cultures. Farmers also focused on flood plant farming. They would plant crops in fertile floodplains where seasonal flooding would naturally irrigate the fields, but this required careful timing to ensure that crops weren't washed away by excessive floods. So, early monsoon farmers might have developed techniques for predicting rain patterns based on natural signs like the behavior of animals or changes in wind patterns and cloud formations. Farmers also created raised fields or mounds, these small plots of land elevated above the floodwaters to prevent crop submersion, often interspersed with drainage canals to divert excess water. With the increase in agricultural scale over time, cultures in monsoon climates needed to control water more effectively. They had to invent advanced irrigation systems and storage technologies. They had to use canals and dikes. Farmers would dig extensive canal networks and dikes to control the flow of monsoon rainwater. These systems not only prevented fields from flooding, but also allowed them to store excess water for use during the dry season. They used terrace farming in hilly or mountainous regions. These terraces reduced soil erosion and allowed water to flow evenly across different levels of farmland. They used water reservoirs, large artificial reservoirs that were constructed to store monsoon rainwater. Some of these date way back and were key for irrigation during dry months and became cultural landmarks often associated with religious or royal patronage. They also made use of tools like plows. The ard plow, which is an ancient tool, was widely used to break up waterlogged soil, allowing for more efficient planting. They used animals like oxen and water buffaloes to pull plows. And they invented simple but effective tools like the shadoof, which is a manual water lifting device, and water wheels that enabled farmers to transport water from rivers and lakes to fields. Monsoon farming technology was deeply connected with traditional knowledge systems, which often blended agriculture with religious practices and astronomical observations. Next, let's take a look at the effect of a monsoon climate on warfare. In regions that are based in monsoon climates, combatants have to adapt to heavy rainfall, swollen rivers, marshlands, and dense vegetation, which will significantly impact how battles are fought. For example, you might have increased ambush and guerrilla tactics. So, the dense forests, the heavy rains, the difficult terrain favors hit and run tactics over large open battles. Armies and monsoon cultures might use ambushes and guerrilla warfare to take advantage of this cover provided by rainforest and jungle environments. For example, think about the Vietnamese making use of monsoon rains and thick forests to execute effective guerrilla tactics during the Vietnam War. In monsoon climates, they might choose mobility over heavy armor. So the swampy, waterlogged terrain during monsoon seasons makes heavy armor impractical. Instead, warriors might favor light, flexible armor made from organic materials like bamboo, leather, rattan. These lightweight materials allow for greater mobility in difficult terrain and ensure that soldiers can move quickly and evade capture in forested or flooded areas. They might also emphasize elevated warfare. So during monsoons, much of the low lying land might be prone to flooding, and some cultures might build their fortifications and military outposts on elevated platforms or on raised stone structures to withstand that flooding. These elevated positions would provide tactical advantages, allowing defenders to monitor and repel attackers in lowland areas. You also need to think about how cultures in your world that are in monsoon climates might adapt their fortifications and their defensive architecture generally. So, the defensive structures need to be able to withstand both human enemies and the natural elements like floods, high winds, and heavy rains. They might integrate moats and water defenses around their fortifications that not only impede advances of enemy forces, but also take advantage of the natural abundance of water during the rainy season. They might build flood resistant walls, so defensive walls that are designed to withstand flooding. Massive stone walls that are raised above flood levels, so you can ensure that your fortifications remain intact during the wet seasons. They might build mud forts and earthen embankments. So, where rivers often overflow during the monsoon, these mud forts and earthen embankments are quick to build, relatively inexpensive, and highly adaptable to a local environment. Then, when floods come, the flexible nature of mud and earth can help absorb the water and reduce the likelihood of collapse. Now, the persistent rain and humidity during the monsoon season can also create challenges for maintaining and using traditional weaponry. Rusting metal, waterlogged materials, and reduced visibility might force monsoon cultures in your world to innovate their weaponry and equipment. They could create water resistant weaponry. In the humid, rainy environments in your world in monsoon climates, the weapons need to be resistant to rust and decay. Think about using materials like bamboo in weapons for spears, for bows, because of their resilience in wet conditions. You also need to think about how a monsoon climate might affect naval warfare or riverine battles. So, the monsoon season in tropical regions dramatically swells rivers and transforms low lying areas into waterlogged landscapes, making naval warfare and riverine battles crucial for military strategy. Monsoon cultures along major rivers might develop advanced warboats or canoes capable of navigating swollen rivers and floodwaters. You could think about long, narrow boats that are agile and tight river systems that you could use extensively during the monsoon season for transportation and warfare. You could also have riverine guerrilla warfare. So, the natural flooding of rivers during monsoons could create opportunities for river based ambushes. Small, fast boats could be used to launch surprise attacks on larger enemy ships. In coastal and riverine cities that are prone to monsoon flooding, defending against naval sieges might be essential. Monsoon cultures could develop riverine fortifications that extend into the water, preventing enemy ships from reaching city walls. You also need to think about logistics and how you're going to move troops and supplies efficiently in a monsoon climate. The heavy rains, floods, and often impassable terrain might mean that traditional methods of supply transport and movement have to be adapted. You could have seasonal warfare. So you could have monsoon cultures adapting their military campaigns to the seasonal rhythms of the rains. Large-scale warfare might just halt during the monsoon as roads become impassable and maintaining large armies in the field is challenging due to diseases. Instead, you could have smaller skirmishes or siege warfare that takes place during the rainy season, while full-scale campaigns resume in the dry months. You could have riverine supply lines, so swollen rivers of the monsoon season might become vital highways for transporting troops and supplies. The armies could rely on rivers as highways, using boats to move soldiers, food, and weapons efficiently across flooded areas. When world building, you also need to think about how a monsoon climate might affect the development of social organization and political structures. The heavy monsoon rains, floods, and the resulting impact on infrastructure, transportation, and food requires political systems that can efficiently coordinate communal efforts, manage resources, and mediate power. Over centuries, these cultures might develop political systems that reflect a need for collective cooperation and the influence of these environmental factors. So, if you're world building the early stages of a monsoon civilization, you might think about political organizations centered around communal water management and agricultural cooperation. The intense monsoon rains could both nourish and devastate crops and require societies to develop communal efforts to manage their water resources, build infrastructure, and ensure their survival. You might have village councils and elders, political authority being decentralized and localized, with village councils or with respected figures playing a crucial role in organizing communal labor required for agriculture, particularly for your irrigation projects, for your flood control systems. They might oversee the maintenance of canals and dikes and terraced fields, ensuring that water resources are properly managed to prevent drought or flooding. You could develop cultures that are based on agricultural collectives, so small scale collective farming being central to their organization. Families and villages could pool their resources to cultivate crops that could withstand the monsoon, such as rice. The cooperative nature of agriculture could lead to egalitarian structures where making is shared among heads of different families or lineages. With the control of water being so crucial in a monsoon climate and it being such a critical resource, early political structures might also develop systems that mediate water rights and resolve disputes. Village councils could act as arbiters, allocating water based on family size, land ownership, and crop needs, and ensuring that the community's collective well being is prioritized. Now, as we move beyond early civilization, monsoon cultures grow in population and complexity. Political power might begin to centralize around leaders who can organize large scale irrigation and water control projects and manage the massive infrastructure necessary to control water resources. You might have the development of hydraulic empires. A hydraulic empire is a society that maintains its political power through control of the water supply. The rulers might consolidate their authority by constructing vast irrigation systems that regulate the water flow during the monsoon and dry seasons. This ability to manage and distribute water could become a source of their political legitimacy. You could see cultures in monsoon climates begin to develop the idea of divine kingship. Rulers could claim divine authority based on their ability to control the forces of nature, including the rains. Their kingship could be intertwined with religious rituals aimed at ensuring favorable monsoons. Kings and political elites could perform rituals to appease the rain gods, reinforcing the idea that the monarch is the mediator between the divine and the natural world. They could integrate religious festivals related to water and rain into their political ceremonies, reinforcing the king's role as a protector of agricultural prosperity. Now, as irrigation systems and agricultural productivity expand, you might also need an increase of centralized bureaucracy to manage water resources. The vast network of canals, reservoirs, and moats in a more advanced culture in a monsoon climate might need the ability to organize labor for the construction of the waterworks required, which in turn will strengthen the political authority of the central government. Now let's turn our attention to the effect of a monsoon climate on trade. The seasonal and predictable nature of monsoon winds creates opportunity for maritime and overland trade routes that connect distant regions and help the exchange of goods, culture, technology, and ideas. In our own world, the monsoon winds were a central factor in the development of long distance maritime trade across the Indian Ocean, the Arabian Sea, and the South China Sea. These winds, which blow consistently in opposite directions depending on the season, enabled ships to travel between regions with greater speed and reliability. These winds create natural sailing windows for mariners. Traders can sail one way in one season and then wait for the monsoon to return home. This pattern makes long distance trade between regions not only feasible but predictable and reduces the risk associated with maritime travel. Now, in your world building, if you're thinking about where major trade ports might lie, think about these monsoon winds. You could have luxury goods that are transported across vast different distances and lead to the rise of prosperous port cities and trade empires. You could have key trading hubs flourishing due to their strategic locations along monsoon driven sea routes. Now, monsoon climates also foster the growth of coastal and riverine cities that became crucial city centers for trade. These cities can develop along river deltas, estuaries, and coastal regions where the monsoon rains replenish water resources and enrich the soil, leading to agricultural surplus and the rise of trade based economies. We talked about ports and trade hubs. So, those ports are strategically located to take advantage of the maritime monsoon routes and the river systems fed by the seasonal rains, and they could serve as meeting points for traders from different regions. You also could have inland or interior cities, particularly those located along major rivers that are affected by monsoon rains, becoming critical points for riverine trade, allowing the transportation of goods to and from interior regions to coastal ports, and then those rivers acting as natural highways, making the movement of agricultural products, textiles, and raw materials easier. Monsoon climates also create fertile agricultural lands that support the growth of inland trade networks. The predictable rains enable regular and abundant harvest, allowing regions to produce surpluses that can be traded both locally and internationally. The ability to cultivate crops like rice, which thrives in flooded fields, played a key role in the development of trade in our own world. Regions like India, Southeast Asia, and China have become major producers of rice, which wasn't only a staple food but also a valuable commodity for trade. Rice surpluses allowed these regions to engage in both local bartering and long distance trade. In our own world, spice also played an important role in monsoon driven commerce. The climate of regions like India, Sri Lanka were ideal for cultivating spices, and these spices became some of the most sought after commodities in the world, driving trade networks that stretched from Southeast Asia to the Mediterranean and beyond. The wealth generated by the trade contributed to the rise of powerful kingdoms and empires. Now, this expansion of trade and trade empires and the use of monsoon winds to get to distant lands, it's not only limited to the exchange of goods, it'll also play a key role in the spread of culture, religion, and technology across the region. The interconnected nature of the trade routes could bring people together from different parts of the world, leading to cultural diffusion and the exchange of ideas. You could have the spread of religion, technological exchanges, cultural and artistic exchanges, architectural designs that you see across regions. Of course, the trade itself and the seasonal nature of the trade might also affect the infrastructure of those regions. So, you might need storage and warehousing. Since traders often have to wait for several months for the next wind to depart, port cities could develop extensive warehousing systems to store goods during the off season. The warehouses could become central to the logistics of trade, ensuring that perishable items are preserved and that luxury goods are protected from theft or damage. It's not all roses, though. While the monsoon winds facilitate trade, they also pose significant challenges and risks that affect how trade's conducted. The unpredictability of the monsoon season, with its frequent storms and rough seas, could lead to shipwrecks and lost cargoes. Mariners might have to develop complex navigational skills and rely on experienced pilots to safely navigate these waters. Coastal regions might need to develop lighthouses and safe harbors to protect incoming ships from the dangers of the monsoon seas. You'd also have supply chain disruptions. So during particularly harsh monsoon seasons, supply chains could be disrupted. Heavy rains, floods, and landslides could make overland trade routes impassable, leading to shortages in certain goods and fluctuations in prices. Inland regions that relied on monsoon fed rivers for transport could also experience interruptions in trade if water levels rose too high or fell too low. Fluctuations in a monsoon climate also could lead to severe disruptions into the political system in your world. Recent research has showed that when the monsoon weakens, especially over long periods, it has a huge impact on agriculture. Less rain means fewer crops, which leads to economic decline and eventually societal crises. This climate crisis, research shows, could have contributed to the fall of major dynasties across Southeast Asia. So, if I could leave you with one key takeaway today, it's that the seasonality of a monsoon climate affects everything from warfare to trade to agriculture to the hierarchical nature of society. If you like this video or want to keep following along as I develop the procedural map generator and seek to incorporate everything that we're learning about the impact of geography on world building, please like and subscribe below. Thanks for watching.